Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the podcast where we review every episode of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. This week we continue our journey with the 6th Doctor and Peri as they find themselves caught in a deadly TV programme in Vengence on Varos. As usual, we're discussing the Doctor, companions and villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on this story, so in order to join in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Team, that's TIMETEAMP on our socials, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com.
Cool. So, Paddington, as per usual, will you please do what you do and give us the story recap? Please and thank you.
Yes, I will. Part 1. On the planet Varos, a man is chained to a wall and struggling to avoid painful laser beams fired at him intermittently, and the footage is broadcast live throughout the city. In one of the homes in the city, couple Arik and Etta complain about the recent food shortages and the impending gubernatorial election. The footage then cuts out and they complain about the poor quality of the recent televised tortures, and then Arik says that he is going to bed. Etta says that he needs to stay awake to cast his vote or they risk being raided by the police. Meanwhile, in his office, the governor is negotiating a resource deal with Syl, the diminutive, lizard-like representative of an intergalactic mining corporation. He says that Syl's prices for the ore, Zeiton 7, which is exclusive to Varos, are too low for the government to sustain its people. Syl says that they have no other valuable resource, but the governor says that they have begun selling the broadcast footage of the tortures throughout the galaxy. Syl expresses interest at this and offers to help with the selling and distribution of the footage in return for lower prices on the ore. The governor refuses and Syl angrily says that they have reached a stalemate. The meeting is interrupted by the chief of police, who tries to assuage Syl's anger but to no avail. Syl says that he will wait until after the election to deal with the potential new governor. He then leaves and a short while later, covertly meeting with the chief, who he berates for not fulfilling his end of the secret bargain to get the governor to agree to the new prices. They are interrupted by a broadcast from the governor to the planet, who asks that the people support his opposition to Syl's offer so they can benefit more. However, the vote does not go in his favour, and in accordance with the law, he is subjected to a cellular disintegration beam. However, he survives and resumes his duties until the time of the next vote. He then goes to leave his office, but is confronted by Syl, who demands to renew their negotiations. The governor agrees but asks for more time to rest, and Syl agrees before going to wait for him in his office. The chief urges the governor to make a deal, saying that he won't survive another failed vote. One of the guards suggests broadcasting the execution of the rebel leader Jandar, the man who was chained to the wall, in an effort to appease the people and gain more support for him for the next vote. The governor agrees and then goes to make the announcement. Elsewhere, on the TARDIS, the Doctor finishes working on the console, but Peri says that his recent track record of repairs have nearly landed him in disaster. Suddenly the console stops working, and the Doctor says that they have stalled mid-flight in a temporal void. He says that without power for the TARDIS to draw upon, they will be stranded there forever. He then sits down and begins to mope about their situation. Peri retrieves the TARDIS manual and says that he may find a solution there. As he lazily flips through the pages, Peri spots the power column in the console move, and the Doctor springs into action. He makes some adjustments and says that the TARDIS is using the last of its energy to try and get them out of the void. He says that in order to fully repair the ship's burnt-out systems, they need to get Zeiton 7, which is thankfully on the nearby Varos, and sets course for it. Back on Varos, Jondar's wife, Areta, is approached by Rondal, one of Jondar's former supporters, who has since become a security officer. He informs her about the impending execution, and she begs him to help Jandar. She tells him that Jandar was imprisoned because he found out about the truth about Varos. She says that it was a former prison colony for the criminally insane before the guards and the administrators completely took it over, and since then they have forced the descendants of the prisoners to become the planet's labour force. He says there is nothing he can do, and they are suddenly joined by a masked man named Quilliam, the chief scientist and interrogator, who gleefully tells Rondal to take her to his lab. Elsewhere, the TARDIS lands in the cell holding Jandar and is fired upon by a trooper guarding him, who believes that the ship is a hallucination caused by the side effect of the energy buildup of the execution beam. The Doctor and Peri exit the TARDIS to confront the guard, who believes they are hallucinatory apparitions. The Doctor manages to disarm him and pushes him back towards Jandar, who knocks him out. This is witnessed by those in the governor's office, and Syl demands that they be caught and executed. Once they are alone, the governor begs Syl to be reasonable with his demands, but he passes out from exhaustion. Syl then orders a message to be sent to the corporation to send an occupying force to take over the planet. Back in the cell, Jandar begs the Doctor and Peri to help, and they release him. A squad of guards arrive, cutting them off from the TARDIS, and the Doctor uses the torture laser to hold off the guards whilst they escape through the corridors. The Doctor manages to shut off the power to the corridors by destroying one of the cables running along the wall. Suddenly, a section of the wall opens and they are summoned inside by someone, and they quickly go inside before the guards find them. They see that their rescuers are Aresha and Rondell, who has decided to help his old friends. The Doctor asks what is going on, and they explain the situation on Varos. The Doctor expresses confusion at this, highlighting that Varos is the sole repository of Zyton 7, but Jandar expresses the opinion that it is worthless. Rondell says they need to escape. He leads them into the corridor again, but they are suddenly attacked by a group of guards. Rondell is killed, and Naretta says they need to go back into the secret passageway. They go to another corridor, and the Doctor says they need to get back to the TARDIS. Jandar says the only way to get to it is through an area called the Purple Zone, which he and Naretta say is a death trap. The Doctor says that they have no other choice, and he leads them into it. Once inside the Purple Zone, they are confronted by a large fly, but the Doctor tells them to shut their eyes, saying it is an illusion. He leads them past it, and once they are in the clear, he tells them to open their eyes again. He catches a smaller fly and says it only appeared larger because of the hallucinatory effect of the Purple Zone. The Doctor asks about the nature of the tortures, and Jandar says that the Governor and the rulers broadcast them to entertain and distract the labourers. The Doctor then continues to lead them towards the TARDIS. They arrive at where the TARDIS was to find it missing, which unbeknownst to them was removed for examination under Syl's orders. The Doctor says they need to find it and again leads them through the corridors. However, he gets separated from the others when they are chased by a squad of guards. Peri, Jandar and Areta are cornered by the guards, who are led by Maldak, the guard that Peri and the Doctor first encountered. He hits Peri in anger, saying that she made him look like a fool, and orders her to be taken to the cells, whilst ordering Jandar and Areta to be brought to the execution area. At the same time, the Doctor enters another corridor and sees an endless desert before him. He continues on through the corridor, seeing a hallucination of Peri beckoning him, but he struggles with the illusionary heat. While this is happening, the Governor makes an announcement saying that the Doctor is aiding the rebellion which seeks to destroy Varos. He calls for a vote of support, and this time he passes. He then joins Syl and the Chief as they watch the Doctor struggle through the illusion. Peri is brought to the room and she watches in horror as the Doctor succumbs to the illusion and collapses to the floor, showing no signs of life. Part 2. The Governor orders the video feed to be cut, and Peri berates them for their cruelty. She lashes out at the Governor, but he says that the Doctor's own mind killed him before asking who she and the Doctor really are. Syl insists that they are industrial spies from a rival corporation, but the Governor tells her to ignore him. The Chieftain turns the conversation back to the topic of selling of Zyton 7, but the Governor refuses to capitulate to Syl's demands. The Chief says that he must obey the will of the people and agree to Syl's terms, but he says he will take no action until he has questioned Peri in private. Meanwhile, the Doctor is taken into a room containing a large vat of acid to dispose of dead bodies. He wakes up as a pair of guards are throwing another body into the vat. He startles them, causing one of them to fall in, and he tries to fend the other one off. The other guard is then pulled into the vat by his colleague, who grabbed him in an attempt to struggle to get out. The Doctor grimaces at their fate before collecting his things and leaving. His escape is detected by the Chief, who reports it to the Governor as he questions Peri. The Governor orders for the Doctor to be recaptured, saying that they can use Peri as bait. Syl then comes in, and together the three of them demand answers from Peri. She tells them the truth, knowing that they won't believe her. The Chief and Syl say that they should submit her to experimentation to try and get the truth out of her, but the Governor takes a softer approach, having earlier established a rapport with Peri as she grieved over the Doctor. She tells them that they came to the planet for the Zyton 7 for the TARDIS. Syl says that she is lying, but they are interrupted by a guard who tells the Governor that Quilliam has managed to recapture the Doctor in the underground corridors. The Governor says to bring them to the old execution grounds, and he goes there with Peri and the others. At the execution grounds, Peri sees the Doctor as well as Jandar and Areta preparing to go up a hangman's scaffold. Peri says that she tried to get them to believe her, but the Doctor tells her that the truth is an illusion on Varos. The Chief says that the Doctor and Jandar will be hanged, whilst Peri and Areta will be subjected to metamorphic experimentation as a warning to females supporting rebellious activity. The Doctor asks for one last request and asks who Syl is. The Governor explains his presence, and the Doctor thanks him before ascending the scaffold. Peri and Areta are dragged away, and the Governor gives the Doctor one last chance to save himself and the others. The Doctor says that if he dies, then Varos will never know its true potential and that they will suffer under Syl's corporation. Syl says that he is lying and orders his personal guards to pull the trapdoor lever. The governor orders his men to stop them, but one of the bodyguards manages to pull the lever and the trapdoor opens. However, the Doctor and Jandar are unharmed as the ropes weren't fastened properly. The Doctor emerges, saying that he knew it was a ruse as the broadcast cameras were turned off. The governor admits that it was a final attempt to get the truth out of him, and he demands to know more about the work of Zyton 7. The Doctor says he will not say anything until he is assured that both Peri and Errata are safe, but Syl angrily demands him to be killed. The governor refuses, saying that he is no longer bound to the vote until such a time as he finds out about the truth of everything. Syl storms out, followed by the chief, who berates him for his greed, which has potentially cost him control of Varos. Syl says that he will control the planet once the occupation force arrives, and he then says he wants to go to the lab to watch the experimentation on Peri and Errata. They arrive at the lab to find Peri turned into a bird-human hybrid, whilst Errata is being turned into a reptilian. The chief is then summoned to the control room, where the Doctor angrily demands to know where Peri is. The chief says that the conversion process has gone too far and they cannot be returned to their normal forms. The governor serves Quilliam, who says that as chief scientist he must know how to reverse the process. Quilliam says that he doesn't completely understand the technology and gleefully suggests letting the process run to see its full outcome. The Doctor demands the machine be turned off, and the governor echoes the demand, but Quilliam refuses. The Doctor then creates a distraction by pulling off Quilliam's mask, revealing the mangled face underneath it, and Jandar uses the opportunity to disarm one of the guards. The Doctor disarms the others and destroys the control panel of the metamorphic machine. The Doctor then forces the nearby Maldak to take him to the lab so he can free Peri and Errata. He and Jandar then lock themselves in the lab and they watch as Peri and Errata slowly return to normal. The Doctor says they need to take them so they can escape through one of the secret tunnels. They find an abandoned guard car, but they are suddenly attacked by a squad of guards as they attempt to hotwire it. They manage to escape, but Peri, still dazed from the effects of the metamorphosis, wanders off and is soon recaptured. She is brought back to the governor's office, where Syl continues to demand his offer be accepted. The governor again refuses, but this time the chief says that he is taking control of the situation, highlighting the governor's failure to stop the rebellion. The chief prepares to call a vote, and Peri says that she can speak in the governor's defense, but he says that no one will believe her. He says that they will need to wait until a new governor is selected from the ruling elite by random selection. Peri says that this is madness, but the governor says it is the way of life on Varos. He then notices Maldak has been left to guard him, and he appeals to his sense of self-preservation, saying that as a senior guard, he could be the person selected to be the new governor. He also says that Maldak is already in trouble for being the one whose security keys the Doctor used to save Peri. Maldak refuses, and the governor asks him to at least give Peri a quick death rather than face the torture of the cellular disintegrator. The vote commences, and the governor's final plea is ignored. As the cellular disintegrator powers up, he struggles through the pain and denounces the regime on Varos, saying that everyone will suffer if it continues. Suddenly, Maldak destroys the disintegrator and says that the Doctor has been located in the end zone of the punishment area. The governor says they need to find him, and Maldak leads them through a secret tunnel out of the office. In the end zone, the Doctor, Jandar, and Errata are subject to a blissful sensory overload, and they happily follow an illusion of themselves further into the tunnels. The Doctor suddenly snaps out of the illusion just in time to see an acid lake in front of them. He leads them down another tunnel, but they encounter a group of feral prisoners who chase after them. They enter another tunnel covered in hanging vines, and the Doctor says not to touch them as he carefully leads them forwards. The feral prisoners pursue them, but fall back when one of them dies after touching one of the vines. They hear a guard car approaching, and the Doctor tells Jandar to carefully attach a length of string to some of the vines, and then draw them back as the guard car arrives. Quilliam and the chief emerge from the car, and the chief orders them to be killed. However, Quilliam wants them recaptured so they can be experimented on, and he gleefully leads the chief and the men forward. The Doctor tells Jandar to drop the string, and Quilliam, the chief, and their men are killed when the vines touch them. The Doctor then leads the others back through the other corridor, and they run into Peri, the governor, and Maldak. Together they all head back to the control room where they find Syl communicating with the invasion force. He tells them that he will soon assume control of Varos, but the governor reads an incoming communication that says a new source of Zyton 7 has been discovered, and the invasion has been cancelled. Syl is ordered by his superiors to pay whatever the governor wants to get as much of the ore as possible. The governor thanks the Doctor and Peri for their help, and agrees to give them as much Zyton 7 as they need for the TARDIS. They leave, and the governor makes a new broadcast saying a new era has begun on Varos, one free from the cruelty of the past, and promises a prosperous future. End of the story. Well, now that we've escaped the vengeance of Varos and learned a small bit about the dangers of broadcast television, we're going to go to the trivia spot and see what you got for us this week, Trish.
Cool. So the air date for Vengence on Varos is the 19th to 26th of January 1985. The writer of this story is Philip Martin. This is the first of 2 main Doctor Who writing credits for Philip. He also wrote a number of Target novels, including this story. He also did the direct-to-DVD story Syl and the Devil's Seed of Arador. Interesting title. We'll see him again in mainstream Doctor Who in the story Mind Warp. We'll see his work again there. Philip sadly passed away in 2020. The director of the story is Ron Jones. This is story 5 of 6 for Ron. We previously discussed his work in Black Orchid, Time Flight, Arc of Infinity, and Frontios. We'll see his work one more time, once again in Mind Warp. The story had the working titles of Domain, just Domain by itself, and Planet of Fear. Planet of Fear was ruled out because it sounded too similar to Planet of Fire. Mm-hmm. And also, so we also already have Planet of Evil, like
yeah,
Planet of is a sort of like it's
like that thing. Like you've got, if you take a look at all the stuff, like you've got Planet of Evil, Planet of the Daleks, Planet of Fire, but then you've also got Mind of Evil and Face of Evil and Planet of Evil. There's an awful lot of recycling that goes on with some of these.
Yeah, I will say there's something to be said for the Star Trek route of just abstract phrases.
Yeah, or Shakespeare quotes, very much.
Yeah. This story was actually originally meant to be the 5th story of the season, but it was moved forward when the Song of the Space Whale was abandoned, which I'm very curious as to what that was, because it sounds very much like a modern Who story.
Yeah.
This story, like the rest of season 22, and you may have gathered from the way Paddy summarized it, was produced in 2 45-minute episodes, but when sold to other countries, those episodes were re-edited into the standard 25-minute format. The cliffhanger for part 1 was the Doctor and Peri arriving on Varos in the TARDIS. And the cliffhanger for part 3 was the Doctor and Jondar's rescue of Peri and Areta from the rehabilitators, respectively.
Okay.
Arak and Etta, not to be confused with Areta, who's a different person. Mm-hmm. So Arak and Etta never interact with any of the characters in the story. They play no part in the main plot. They are merely there to observe and comment in a similar manner to, and it goes back to actually that me and Paddy talk about work earlier. It's very similar to the Greek chorus of observing and commenting on what's happening.
And like, I nearly wanted us to actually discuss their chorus-like commentary throughout the story, but I think that we can just talk about the story in general without actually talking about them specifically.
Yeah, I think they'll probably come up in the overall because they are also representative of the audience, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on.
Yeah.
There is a deleted scene which shows an extended conversation between the Doctor and Peri when the TARDIS was immobile.
Mm-hmm.
The Doctor's attempt to fix the chameleon circuit from the previous story gets mentioned, and apparently continued to malfunction during an off-screen adventure that we don't get to see, where the TARDIS materialized as a pyramid on the frozen plains of Yuan 9. Afterwards, the Doctor stabilized it back to generating the police box appearance, and Peri jokes that the TARDIS might end up as Nelson's column next, until the Doctor shouts at her for insulting his workmanship. So, interesting one there. While Eric Saward liked this script, he felt it was poorly directed, and he wasn't quite happy with Peri's role, feeling that her role in the action wasn't sufficiently prominent. And we might get into that when we talk about Peri as a character. Mm-hmm. So there's a line in here, which when they were doing the audio commentary, literally everyone, I don't know if the audio commentary is behind the sofa segment, which just for anyone who hasn't seen the Blu-ray set, the behind the sofa has Wendy Padbury and Sylvester McCoy, and then it has Sarah Sutton, Janet Fielding, and Peter Davison, and then it also has Nicola Bryant, Colin Baker, and guy whose name I've forgotten who now does Davros in this time.
Julian Bleach. Oh no,
No, in this time period.
The
time period. Yeah.
Timeline.
Because there's a line where it's like, basically, they need more water, Peri, or they need more than water. Basically, it's a Perrier water gag. Of course, her name is Peri, and they talk about water. And what's interesting is that the other actors in the behind the sofa were like, how did they get away with that? That's advertising. You can't have advertising on BBC. You're not allowed. It's cited that Colin ad-libbed a line, but the general consensus that was probably a John Nathan Turner thing.
Yeah.
Colin did ad-lib some other stuff, but that, I think, was a J&T introduction. Filming the scenes where Peri is sort of in her part bird state, and was actually really hard for Nicola Bryant because she's allergic to feathers. But also because it took so long to put it on, and they were running out of time, one of the days when they took it off, they basically just ripped it off her skin. And so a few days later, when they were filming outdoor stuff, presumably for a different story, she was getting really badly sunburnt on where they had sort of just torn it off. It was all like blotchy and stuff. So not a good time. What also wasn't a good time was the first recording of the noose execution scene, where part of the set collapsed under the weight of the actors and they actually fell through the floor. Now, fortunately, they didn't actually have their necks in the nooses. Although, obviously, the nooses weren't actually tied to anything, they would have been fine. But still, it was a very much difficult. Another difficult scene was the two Varos guards who fall into the vat of acid. It was very difficult to stage. Ron Jones remained completely dissatisfied even after several retakes. And he was aware that the way it was filmed kind of suggested that the Doctor was culpable in what happened. And I'm sure we will definitely talk about that a little bit later. Philip Martin had initially conceived it as like a comedic routine and was disappointed by how it was presented on screen. This is something I'm going to touch on the overall. There's always so many ways to make things funny in this story. Syl is an interesting character that we will talk about in some much greater depth later on. Originally, Syl was just a minor role, while the Governor was meant to be the main villain. But Eric Soward suggested making Syl the main villain and the Governor more of an accomplice type. Philip Martin originally conceived the amphibious Syl as a reaction to a quote that he recalled from Isaac Asimov, who had observed that aquatic creatures rarely featured in science fiction and television, so he decided to introduce a more aquatic creature. BBC producer Alan Shallcross had written to his colleagues encouraging them to make a greater effort to hire performers with physical disabilities around this time, which is nice. His memo was conveyed to Ron Jones, which led him to audition Nabil Shaban, who was intrigued by the prospect of portraying a villain as complex as Syl and accepted the role. Alan Shallcross, however, was not happy because he didn't like the idea of, let's hire more actors with disabilities, be more inclusive. Why is he playing a villain?
Yeah.
It didn't really gel with what he wanted. He didn't like him being a monster. That wasn't really what he was going for. This is one of those stories, and again, I'm sure we'll get into it later on, that was cited by critics who complained that the series was too dark and violent. Most notably, the acid bath scene was one that particularly bothered people. Okay, we're going to go into our cast. I'm going to go down through a number of people. We're not going to discuss everybody on this list. Some people came off the list like yesterday, so we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll just go down through them. So as John Dar, we have Jason Connery. This is the only Doctor Who acting credit for Jason. He's perhaps best known for being the second actor to play the title role of Robin of Sherwood, which he was actually auditioning for while he was doing the story. His non-Who credits include The Untold Story, Alien Strain, General Hospital, and Smallville. He's also done a lot of voice work, including several Lord of the Rings video games. And yes, he's related to Sean Connery. He is his son. Apparently, he was also like a total fanboy because this is like his first main like proper job on TV, and apparently he was like so excited. As the Governor, we have Martin Jarvis. This is the third and final Doctor Who credit for Martin. We previously saw him in The Web Planet as Helio, were the leaders of the Monoctra. He was also in Invasion of the Dinosaurs as Butler, one of the scientists who works in the underground bunker.
Mm-hmm.
He's also done a number of Doctor Who audio stories, and his non-Who credits include Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Wreck-It Ralph, Titanic, and the Batman Arkham video games, where he voices Alfred.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. As Maldak, we have Owen Teale. This is Owen's only credit in the main show of Doctor Who. However, he was also in the Torchwood episode Countryside, which is horrendous.
It's a fucked up episode. I
Like
can't
horrendous in a great way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about it. Like when we eventually get to doing Torchwood, I can't wait to talk about it.
And he's also done some Doctor Who audio work. Outside of Doctor Who, he's probably most well known for playing Sir Alistair Thorne in Game of Thrones, from what most people know him from. He looks like a baby Alistair Thorne in this, I would say. Yeah. He looks so young. His other non-Who credits include the 1991 Robin Hood movie, The Last Legion, The Rig, Wolf, A Discovery of Witches, and The Line of Duty. The chief officer, or chief, is Forbes Collins. That is the only Doctor Who acting credit for Forbes. His non-Who credits include Dick Turpin, Paul Dark, Dick Barton, Special Agent, Pirates, and Maid Marian and Her Merry Men. I will say there seems to be a bit of a trend with like Robin Hood releases characters for these actors. As Quilliam, we have Nicholas Chagrin. I butchered his name. My apologies, Nicholas. Only Doctor Who acting credit for Nicholas. His non-Who credits include The Knock, London Spies, Upstairs, Downstairs, and Hollyoaks. Nicholas sadly passed away in 2017. As Aretta, we have Geraldine Alexander, only a Doctor Who acting credit for Geraldine. Her non-Who credits include Bridgerton, The Child in Time, Extras, and EastEnders. And last but not least, as Syl, we have the previously mentioned Nabil Shaban. This is the first of 3 on-screen Doctor Who credits for Nabil. We'll see him again in The Trial of a Time Lord and Mind Warp. He was also in the DVD story Syl and the Devil Seeds of Arador, which I'm just saying, like, I am never watching that. I'm just saying it right now. Slight spoiler for my thoughts later on. I'm never watching that.
Yeah.
Additionally, he's also done a number of Doctor Who audio stories. Outside of Doctor Who, his credits include Children of Men, Morticia, and Another World.
Just want to point out something there, that technically Mind Warp is Trial of a Time Lord. It's one of the stories that makes up the Trial of a Time Lord framework.
Okay. I don't know why they listed them separate.
Wait, if I'm thinking, like, I haven't seen Trial of a Time Lord in years, so technically might be 2 more appearances within that story, within Trial of a Time Lord itself.
Okay.
But we will find out in however many weeks. I just to reiterate, I am not doing a Trial of a Time Lord all in one fucking go. Not a hope.
Yeah, no, we won't be doing that. No. Nobody wants that. Paul, nobody wants that. Before.
Oh.
We love you, my dude. Okay. So we have gone through the story summary. Thank you very much. We have gone through the trivia. Thank me very much.
Thank you very much.
And now we're on to our character discussion, which is, let's put it this way, the meat and bones of this podcast. So we will discuss the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Companions, we have Peri. Now, do we want to discuss Jondar and or anyone else?
I don't think so, because they're essentially, they deliver one or two lines of exposition to help with the narrative of the story, and after that they become respectively muscle and additional damsel in distress.
Cool, no problem.
Yeah.
Then we have, do we have prominent characters?
I would say we do. We have one, and that is the Governor. I view him as a prominent character.
Brilliant. Then we have our villains of the Chief and Syl. And then the other characters that we haven't mentioned here, but we mentioned in trivia, would be Maldak and Quilliam.
Yes, I would like to discuss both of them. Definitely Quilliam, because there is a trifecta of villainy here that he is a part of. And I also have thoughts on Maldak.
Would you put Maldak as a prominent character?
Nope, I would not.
Where would you put him?
Oh, he's a villain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okie dokie then. I'm sure you will explain the thought process in this.
Oh, I will. I really will.
Okay. So, as is usual, Paddington, your thoughts on the Doctor, please, and thank you.
Right. So, thoughts on the Doctor. A bit of a moaning Minnie at the start, because it's this sort of like sit down and it's like, oh no, eternity here. I can't be arsed to try and get out of it. Whatever shall I do? Woe is me. Woe is me. And like very kind of, nicely just telling Peri, going, yeah, well, like you get to die of old age and I get to like be reborn and then die of old age and be reborn again. And it's like, okay, yeah, like, that does suck, but at least fucking try and do something, But so outside of that, like, don't want to sound like a broken record, but fucking Colin is crushing it as the Doctor for me anyway. Like he's so good, because his interactions with Peri on the TARDIS, that relationship has stabilized. It's actually gotten to a point now where the dynamic is firmly set. And it is very, like, he's brash, he's conceited, he's egotistical, but he's not invulnerable to being pointed. Like, it's very easy for someone to pop that fucking ego balloon. And we'll talk about more with, like, on Peri's side of things. But it's his, like, Twin Dilemma Doctor would have gone off on her absolutely for popping that ego balloon. Now he's like, well, just like, well, shut up, Perpigilium, just like that side of things. But there's a part that I love is when he rescues Peri from the metamorphic thing. And he says that, like, you need to like reestablish their mental identity. You need to let them know who they are. And he's like, you're Peri. And the smile on his face, like trying to reassure, like, goes, Perpigilium Brown. I was like, I really like that. And like, he's in this, like, every time that he finds her again after they're separated or in danger, there's an arm around the shoulder, there's a hug, there's a kind word, and it's like, there we go. I'm happy now. In terms of his stuff with the villains, it's very classic Doctor. Very, like, his interactions with the Governor are great, because it's like he can sense the Governor isn't evil and is trying to get him to address his actions and, like, listen to, like, you're the power here, use it for good. his interactions with Syl are a bit more of a sort of who's this fucking shrieking, like fishman thing. Like he's gonna fuck you over. But I think where the classic Doctor Who villain dynamic is with Quilliam. And their first encounter in the tunnel when the Doctor is wearing one of Quilliam's spare masks. And it's this sort of it's very James Bond villain kind of retort side of things. Then when it comes to the acid vat sequence, it's like when the Doctor he's not, the way that I read it is that he's not actually trying to push the guy into the acid vat. He's just trying to hold him off with a gurney, and it's just that the other guy fucking pulls him in. And the Doctor grabs his coat and he's he pulls the face and goes, "Forgive me if I don't join you." And it's that's a very gallows humor quip to come from the Doctor. It's not anything that we've heard differently. We've heard other Doctors make these sort of comments before. I really enjoyed Colin in this. I thought he did a great job. I think he's really established himself as the Doctor, and there's some great visual moments here. I think that one of them in particular is in the end zone sequence, where they see that illusion of themselves beckoning each other on, and he just sticks out the hand and he's got the head down and he's full of intent. He's your apparitions, your falsehoods, you're not we're real, you're not. It's that's a fucking book cover or a DVD cover or something. So kudos to the direction or the director of photography on that for getting that shot, because I thought it was outstanding. But yes, overall, very good representation of the Doctor in the story, I thought.
Excellent. Very good. So for me, the one thing that's apparent for me right now is that if we were doing it based solely on performance, Colin's rambling would be very difficult based solely on performance, because like you said, this has been another belter of a performance for Colin. He seems so comfortable in the role. You look at him and you're like, yeah, that's the Doctor, 110%, no question. I think his continued development as a character from when we were first introduced to him in the Twin Dilemma, I think we're seeing now that the sort of cynical and brash demeanor is just part of who this Doctor is now. It's just part of who he is. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a moral compass. It doesn't mean that he's not caring. It certainly doesn't mean that he doesn't care for Peri. He very clearly does. But I think we're really starting to see him settle as his Doctor. But not in the same way that we saw the others, where to kind of say, for Peter, or for even for Patrick in a little way, it took a while for them to sort of find their groove. I think he found his groove very early. I think Colin found the groove very early on. But obviously, given the story beats for the character over the last 3 stories, this is sort of, in my mind, it's kind of come to an end now. It's sort of solidified, and this is who he is. I agree with you that I like the dynamic with Peri. I think it's settled into, again, their own thing. It's not like Peri was with the 5th Doctor, which I think is good. I think the Doctor-companion dynamic should change when the Doctor changes. I think that's really important. I think on the couple of occasions where it doesn't change, I think it actually hinders both characters. So if you go back to our other characters who've seen crossovers from one to the other, we had Ben and Polly going from the 1st Doctor to the 2nd Doctor. Their dynamic really changed with the 2nd Doctor, because the 1st Doctor, they were kind of, at least in their own minds, taking care of him a lot.
Yeah.
And then that position changed. With Sarah Jane going from 3 to 4, it went from sort of debonair uncle niece kind of relationship to best friends, and it's good to see that dynamic shift and change. So I think it's really good that their dynamic has changed. I think in terms of the scenes in the TARDIS in particular, I think they're getting to their own version of banter.
Yes.
It's not quite there, 110%, but they're getting there. They're clearly very comfortable around each other. And like she has no issue calling him on his shit, and like I said, occasionally he just on occasion go like, why? Like, too far. You've hurt my feelings. Which is cool. I think in this story, though, I mean, there's a lot that we see that I understand why people criticize it, but I think really, like, I mean, I watched the story and then I watched the Behind the Sofa, and so I have seen the acid bath scene now a few times, and I agree with you. Like, I do not consider that scene to be, from the Doctor's point of view, or looking at the Doctor's, I mean, is it a dark scene? Yeah. I mean, it is, right? But from the Doctor's point of view, it's no different than any other scene where the Doctor knocks someone off a wall or does anything else in self-defense. Because everything he does is in self-defense. Like, the first guy who falls in is a total fucking accident. Like, that was just, 3 people in his face and one stands up and the other guy fell over. The second guy was actively trying to fuck him into the acid.
Mm-hmm.
And the Doctor is using the gurney as a defense shield. And ultimately, while he had him pushed back up against the acid bath, he wasn't pushing him in, he was pushing him away from himself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first guy who dragged the other guy in. Like, the Doctor did nothing in that. Did he do anything to save them? No. But I would argue there's nothing he fucking could have done. They were dissolving in acid.
Yeah.
There was literally nothing he could do. I think his parting comment of, "You'll forgive me if I don't join you," again, we've heard similar things from that line actually, for me, is a verse of John Pertwee line.
Yes.
Do you know? And I think that's the difference. I think we talked about this a bit in another episode, or else I'm imagining a conversation we had. Like, John Pertwee was beating people up all the time. But because it was like this sort of over-the-top Venusian Aikido and whatever, people tend to not rag on it as much.
Yeah.
But it's no different than what Colin's doing. In fact, I would argue that in many ways John's is worse because he often leans into it.
Like, this is the thing, was like, whenever kind of people talk about like, the violent nature of a like a Doctor that's not in the the popular vein, like was like the more recent Doctors, and obviously with Colin, I'm like, don't forget that we reviewed an episode, Ribos Operation, where the Doctor put a grenade down a guy's pants and let him wander off into a corridor. So the Doctor has never been a fucking angel, ever.
Yeah.
So,
but I think, and in the Behind the Sofa, I think Sylvester kind of agreed with me. I think Colin gets undue criticism in this story in particular for that scene, because while it sort of gives an implication that the Doctor is more ruthless, I disagree. It's gallows humor, and it'd be no different. Like, I think it was Peter Davison that said that, like, it came across like a very Tom line as well. That's something Tom would say. So I think people are just being a bit nitpicky in a mean way. The other thing is that, like, his dynamic with the villains is very interesting, because realistically speaking, he spends so much of his time going through the trials and whatever. He doesn't actually get a whole lot of time to interact with them one-on-one.
No.
And it's great that he makes ample use of the time that he does have. I think, the way that he sort of knows them quite well from observing them, that, like, when they're in that like the final section of the end game and you've got, like, the poisonous vines or whatever, and he knows if he just eggs them on, they'll walk right into it themselves. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a really good outing from Colin. I think as the Doctor, it's interesting. Is there a couple of things I would have liked to have seen more of? Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of the Doctor and the Governor actually talking properly. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the Governor, I'm sure. I think they probably could have cut some of our characters to give the Doctor more time, and Peri as well, we'll talk about her in a second, but to give more of an interaction time between our leads and our villains. Because there's several interactions there that were kind of set up, and I think there was sort of some follow through missing from them. Particularly the Doctor and Syl. Like, I wanted to see, well, in a way, I wanted to see more of that. We'll get to him later.
Yeah.
But like I said, like, I mean, currently in terms of Colin's performances, it's 3 for 3. In terms of
Yeah.
like, you know, best and worst stories, I'm sure we'll get to that when the time comes. The one thing I will say, right, and I've meant to say this for the last 3 weeks, or like 3 stories, and I've completely forgotten. So again, slight humble brag, I have met Colin in person twice.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realise, now maybe it's because he's older and he's gotten shorter as he's aged, Colin's very fucking tall.
He is. He's a big boy. He's a lanky boy.
And I don't know why, because like I said, I've met him in person, but I've met him as an older man, so like it's different. And usually he sat down at the table signing. Do you know what I mean? So there's that. But I don't think I always assumed him to be on the shorter side, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe like around, you know, Jamie's height, maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he was like as tall as Tom or whatever, because he really is quite tall.
Yeah. Those Baker boys are quite tall. No relation.
Also, random fact.
Mm-hmm.
In the story we see his question mark braces for his trousers. Apparently, Peter wore those exact same braces, but we never saw them because they were always under his jumper.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Also, another little thing that I loved was he rubs the cat pin for good luck. You know what he's saying? There's just, yeah.
To be honest, right, just to massively lower the tone, every time I see that, I'm like, oh, I should really talk about that. But all I can think of describing it is that Colin rubs his pussy. That's literally all I see.
Yeah. I'm so proud of you. Never change. Never ever change.
But literally, like, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, Colin rubs his, oh, fuck's sake.
Yeah.
To say pin. No.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, let's move on to our companion, which is the lovely Miss Peri.
Yes. I feel very sorry for Peri in the story because of the horrible fucking treatment she gets from the Varosians. Like, it's fucking detestable. Like, so like, and I'll have thoughts, like I'll comment on each of those people that's subjected to those fucking tortures. But like, I made a comment when we were talking about enlightenment that Tegan was in a fucking horrible situation. But watching someone that was invested in Tegan's character growth, I appreciated her overcoming it. And it's the same way. It's an entirely new, horrible experience to put someone into. I would even say worse than because Tegan's one was more psychological in its torment. This is physical in its torment, and it is there's a slight psychological element to it, absolutely, but again, what I appreciate about it is that it's persevering through this physical torment, and she doesn't fall to pieces after it. Like, she kind of, or she doesn't let her affect her actions, and that is showcased in her interactions with the governor afterwards, where the governor is essentially being given his death sentence. And whether it's true for mainly self-preservation purposes, or she sees, like, kind of like Darth Vader-ish, like she sees the good in them. She's like, well, maybe if I say something, would that help? It's like speaking in his defense. So it's like, for Peri to go through all this and to overcome it really actually is a testament to her character, which I really, really enjoy. Outside of that particular aspect of it, though, I love how comfortable she is in the TARDIS now. Like, the TARDIS breaks down. What's the first thing she does when he's having a fucking moan in the corner? Is break out the TARDIS manual and just essentially throw it at him. Here, sort it out. And then she's going through it. She's trying to desperately understand it. I love the whole American versus British pronunciation of Z and Z. I thought that was kind of funny. And like, again, just cementing with the relationship with the Doctor, where it's like, yeah, this is their banter. This is funny, and they've got like their own little kind of, even when they're out at the start, like when they first come out of the TARDIS, and like Maldak is like, "Who are you?" Oh, we're here to repair your helmet, which is not right, Peri. And she's like, straight away, absolutely, yeah, I'm doing it. But no, the real meat of her in terms of plot driving or character development is those interactions with the governor, because she brings out his humane side, which will then lead to like, interesting conversation about the governor side of things, which is why he doesn't fall into the villain camp. I put him in the prominent character camp. So yeah, she suffers a horrible amount. Like, it's one of the more negative aspects to this story because of how much abuse Peri gets. But again, in that sense of, I like it simply for the fact that we get to see the strength of Peri's character as she perseveres and overcomes and rises to the occasion. Would prefer not to be that way, but I'm glad that I'm glad that something positive comes out of us.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think like Peri serves a very particular role in the story. She serves two particular roles. One is she is one of the many audience insert characters, which is the empathetic audience. Like, we're meant to connect with Peri, so she is the one who goes through so much of the brutality on Varos to show how brutal it is, because obviously we see, the natives of Varos being tortured. There's talk of cannibalism.
Yeah.
We see all of this, but it's happening to characters we don't know. For us to connect to it, really, we have to see the characters that we do know going through it. And Peri is the one that's mainly experiencing that. Even as she's watching the Doctor, passing out and dying in the, mind desert, as it were, whatever. She's the one going through it. And it makes the story one of the more interesting ones, where we've talked about before that a damsel in distress story doesn't mean it's a bad story for a character.
Mm-hmm.
You could be the damsel in distress and it's not a bad thing. And I think this story really exemplifies that, because here Peri is very much the damsel in distress. Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot she can do to save herself. But to your point, she is never woe is me.
No.
The closest she gets to woe is me is when, at the very beginning, and the Doctor's like, it's fine for you. You'll just die and you'll be gone.
Yeah.
And I'm going to die and be reborn. And she kind of was just like, what the fuck? Like, dude. And that's as close as she gets to. She's not. Like, yeah, I think she calls the Doctor for help, as anyone in that situation would. But there's no wailing. There's no crying. It's very similar to her story with Peter. I've forgotten the name of. Nope, look it up. Need to look it up.
She only had two.
Yeah, but I've forgotten the name of them. Caves of Anjazani. It's very similar in that aspect of, yes, she is the damsel in distress, and yes, horrible things are done to her, and she goes through a horrible experience. So she has a more passive role, but that doesn't take away from her resilience in the face of cruelty. She still very much stands up for herself. And I love that she doesn't lose her empathy Like, it would be very easy for her to say, fuck you, Governor, you're a total prick, I don't have anything to do with you. But she doesn't. And also with Maldak, who did smack her across the face.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't, once she sort of starts to understand what's happening, and she realizes, oh, wait, it's the other two in particular. Still is separate, but in terms of the people of Varos, there's the other two who are really pulling the strings, and the governor is just a puppet, and Maldak is in many ways a puppet. She sort of is like, okay, they're cogs in this wheel, but they're the cogs in the middle who have no choice but to turn. Do I think she lets them off a bit lightly? Yeah. I mean, they're not completely fucking pick ignorant. Like, they did make deliberate choices for themselves that, you know, negatively impacted other people. But I like the fact that she, you know, like you said, like, she tried to save the governor at the end. And I was actually like, if you watch the way Nicola's acting when he's being, you know, going through the cell disintegrator thing, at the end, I don't know if you noticed it, but her hand kind of twitches as if she wants to reach out and hold his hand.
Yeah.
But obviously she can't, because then she'll get caught on the beam as well. But you can tell, like, her hand keeps twitching and, like, just slightly moving as if she wants to reach out and just hold his hand and just be there with him to give him comfort, which I think is lovely. The other thing, I would have liked to have seen her interact more with the other characters. Again, I think we have too many characters in the story, personally, that they don't really get to interact as much as they would like. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm loving Peri in this. I think in this story, her accent bothered me the least. It will continue to bother me, but in this story, it bothered me the least. But yeah, I also do love, like you said, like, her comfortability with the TARDIS, and the fact that she was even just reading off, like, yeah, there's oxygen, it's underground environment, whatever. Like, they're a team, which is good to see. Yeah, she's not quite on some other people's level. Like, you know, she's not Nissa, who, like, can do the whole thing by herself. And it's a nice continuation of last week, where she was like, I can't fly the bloody thing, like, you know, whatever. Yeah, she can't fly, but she's getting to understand the sort of surface level workings of it. And like you said, when in doubt, go find the fucking manual. Make him read it.
Exactly.
Which I quite liked.
Yeah. Just because you were mentioning Peter's stories there, my mind kind of went back to, do you remember that weird kind of part in Planet of Fire where she's having, like, a nightmare about being in the dark with her stepdad, or, like, her stepdad putting her into it? And it's like, we've had two instances now where Peri has undergone, like, so we've had the whole thing with Shara's Jack and that weird fucking Phantom of the Opera vibe. And here we have another thing where she's placed under control of, you know, again, for lack of a better, that's what they are, is men, and she's subjected to these horrible fucking tortures. But with the Shara's Jack thing and with this, like, she shows that strength of character. And I'm wondering, like, I am kind of fascinated to see where, like, would this strength of character have come from some sort of backstory with that throwaway segment, or was it always ever intended for that type of thing? I just thought of it there, it came into my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've sort of moved a bit away from my headcanon on that particular scene, because that scene, to me, like, you know, in Planet of Fire, I mean, the subtext in that was very nearly text. But I think, in fairness, I don't give Eric Soward and Jonathan Turner a whole lot of credit. Because to be honest, they don't always deserve it.
Nope.
But I think, particularly given Eric's comments about how he didn't think Peri added enough to the action of the story, I do think that the way her character is developing, they're very deliberately trying to not have her just be screaming in the corner. And I think that's a very deliberate characterization choice they have. However, she's also a very attractive young woman, so they will continue to dress her in, shorts and a shirt.
Shorts and a tight t-shirt.
Yeah. And that just is the way it is. And I don't know if it's the time or whatever, but there's a much more, we saw it through Peter's run. Like, if you think about, Tom's run through to now, even particularly Tom's run to now, though, so, through the 80s, we have seen more of it lean into the darker behavior towards our companions. Much more than we saw originally. That's not to say there was none in the older shows. Looking at you, Keys of Marinus. But it's much more prevalent and prominent. I would say probably Peter's run onwards. Tom's run didn't have too many of them. With Peter's run onwards, it's becoming much more prevalent. But I like the fact that Eric has sort of made it clear that, to your point, Peri doesn't cave to it. Which I think is really good. Okay, so on to our prominent character. I will say, I would argue that if we're going to talk about Maldak, I would put him as a prominent character. So after we discuss the Governor, I want to discuss him next. I'm curious why you have him as a villain, but the Governor as a prominent character. But we'll do the Governor first. So what were your thoughts on the Governor?
So, the Governor for me is probably one of the most interesting characters I've seen in a while in the show. Because, is he the honest man in Parliament? Or is he the good guy caught in a bad situation? Combination of both? Neither? Something in the middle? He's a fascinating character, I thought. Because there's a failing in this story, I think, and I think it's a failure, as you said, to utilize the supporting characters to their extent. So Jondar and Arata, they gave us a small bit of exposition, which is this was a former prison colony or prison world, that the administration and guards have now become the upper class, and the prisoners and their descendants became the labor force, the working class of the planet. Well, but apparently it's this big lie. Apparently it's lost in the ages or whatever the case is. There's a rebellion, but there doesn't really seem to be a rebellion. It just seems to be one guy that was established as, he found out the big terrible secret, and they're just labeling it as rebellious intent. I don't know. But if we had more of that, we might be able to get a better read on the Governor. Now, I think he's a decently fleshed out character, don't get me wrong, because he seems to be someone that is actively trying to make the lives of the people on Varos better. I think it's across the board, because the point he raises for the first vote we see is, do you want the short-term gain? Do you want that immediate satisfaction? Or if you just struggle with me for another small bit, we'll reap the greater reward in the long term. So there's that aspect of it. Now, the darker side of his aspect is that he does go along with that. He's going, broadcast the tortures. We need to keep the people happy. Let's sell off this essentially snuff footage to other people, to our plants, so that we can feed ourselves. He's not doing his best to fucking fix the broken system. But it's through him we get to figure out just how broken this gubernatorial system is. And it's he's as much of a prisoner in it as himself. Granted, but he has power to try and change it, but he doesn't, because he's still kind of reaping a small bit of the benefit of it. But yeah, he's putting themselves into these horrible fucking known situations, for the betterment of the people. It's very interesting, very very flawed but interesting character. I do think, though, we get to see what he wants to be with his stuff with Peri. And I don't know whether it's the fact that it's, oh, death is the great leveler, and I'm actually getting close to being death now, so I'm kind of a bit more clarity, or if it's talking to Peri, like someone that's outside the system that he doesn't have to watch what he's fucking saying or who he's speaking to, that it's like he does see how broken things are. And it does seem to me like he wishes he could have done more, that he hadn't bought into the whole thing. And I think at the end, when he says that message to the people about like a brighter future, a more prosperous future for Varos, I kind of believe that that's what he means, that it's like, we're going to start from scratch and we're going to rebuild. And I think Martin did outside of the fact that he reminded me so much of Richard Madley from Richard and Judy, I thought he did a fantastic job playing this character. Like, I was engaged in every single interaction, every single scene that he had, be it with the Doctor and Peri, or with the Chief and Syl, or his appeal to Maldak. I just like, this is a guy that I would gladly sit down and watch like a 6-part political BBC thriller with him as a character. So my hats off to Martin for the performance, because he presents a very flawed, interesting character that's ripe for discussion like this.
I agree with you. I think Martin's performance was outstanding. I think there's a couple of standout performances in this story. I think Martin's is certainly one of them. I also agree that the Governor is probably the most complex character we get in the story. Because like just to reiterate for listeners, like the way the governorship works, you're not elected. It's by lot.
Mm-hmm.
So the way he describes it is that there's sort of like the senior guard, as it were. Maldak is one of them. Right? There's like the 12 senior guards. And whenever a governor dies, because he lost the boat too many times, the chief puts those 12 names into a hat, and one is drawn at random. Mm-hmm. And you get made governor. So you're not voted into the position, but you're dependent on the public vote to remain alive. There is no retirement. There is no abdication. It is, you stay governor for as long as the people agree that you should. And if they disagree with you enough times in a short enough period of time, you will not survive. Because every time they disagree with you, you get yourselves disintegrated. So I think it's very interesting that his fate completely hangs in the balance. And I agree with you that for the most part, he appears to be trying to make it work. You know? He doesn't just let Syl walk all over him.
No.
He does let the chief walk all over him a little bit, and we'll talk about the chief in a bit. But he's clearly trying to get the best for his people. I do agree with his I wouldn't say his turn later, but like his realization later of there is another way. You know, what we were being told by our apparent allies is not truly reflective of what the universe is like. You know, I can work this, I can make this a better position for the people of Varos. And I do agree with that. I think his appeal to Maldak on behalf of Peri was very good. But also the fact, like, as he is dying, as far as he knows, he's still talking to the public and still trying to convince them that there is a better way, which I think is very good. What I don't want to walk around, though, is the fact that while he is a victim of the system, he does still make decisions within that system that are his own decisions. So he chooses to continue torturing people and put it on screen. And maybe it's because it's the way it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like he's a puppet, but he's a puppet with a certain amount of free will.
Mm-hmm.
And up until really he kind of started to connect with Peri. Like when he had that private chat with her, I think is when he sort of started being like, okay, this is weird. Let's have a frank and honest conversation. Up until that point, he was still very much in the camp of, yeah, put the torture on TV and yeah, let's sell it. And I would say that he didn't take as much pleasure in it
Mm-hmm.
as other people did, but he was willing to use it to buy himself time, like when Bach or whatever his name is, the guy at the beginning, says like,
Right.
hey, why don't you kill off Jandor in this really interesting way by having the thing overload? That would keep the eyeballs on, of the audience and like maybe get you some more time. And he's willing to do that to buy himself time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could argue that he's trying to buy himself time to make a deal. He's also just trying to extend his own life. Like, that just is what it is. So yeah, I agree with you. I think he is a very complicated character. I, unfortunately, don't have a lot of faith in him making effective change for his people, at least not during his reign as governor.
Yes, because I suppose, like, I was going to save it to the overall, but the very end is basically, he says, like, we no longer have to, it doesn't have to be bread and circuses anymore. We can find a new way. And you have the couple, you have Eric and Atta, or whatever they're called, and they're like, we're free. And it's like, to do what? I don't know. And like the screen just goes fuzzy, and it's like, do you know what it kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of if you can remember, the end of Battle for Planet of the Apes, where it's like in the future, and he says, and Caesar gave us our laws so that we would always live in peace, and we would never fight humans again. And it just cuts to that image of the statue of Caesar crying because it won't work. It's like, I got that sense. It's like they don't know what to do with their liberty, so someone is inevitably going to put it back to the way that it was, because that's what they knew.
Yeah, and like, yes, they'll have more money, but still these people found enjoyment in the torture of others, including their leaders. So I worry for him.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. And it's like, yeah, like it was like it when you first watch it, it seems like such a weird, well, that was kind of a sudden ending. But when you rewatch it and you're like, it's the implication of what the ending means is why it's, yeah. I was just like, fuck it. Yeah, so like definitely one of the most complex and interesting characters we've had in a good while.
Okay. Maldak.
Cunt.
Why?
Because
other than he punches her in the face.
Yeah, okay. Slaps Ferry in the face. Absolutely. Just a kid, you made me look foolish. Sorry, I know enough to say that word, punt. But yeah. His turn isn't noble. His turn, whatever, like, it's Maldak, or not Maldak, the governor pointed out that it's a case of, you could get picked and you're going to be in the exact same situation that I'm in. And you've also got the public perception of scrutiny against you because, well, you're the one that didn't stop the Doctor in the first place. And then you're also the one that, he used his key. We've seen what the society is like. So, like, if he was selected, it's purely self-preservation. He's only doing this for him. And then at the very end, like, I would have liked to have seen an apology, or at least an acknowledgement of the fact that he fucking struck a woman for no other reason. And it's just like, I don't think I wouldn't classify him as a prominent character, because he's only out to save his own skin. That's essentially what it is.
Okay.
And that's why I put him into the villain camp.
I don't think he's a villain. I don't think he's anything. He is a minor character who represents the cog in the wheel. I don't think he rises to the level of anything. If he was to rise to the level of anything, I would say he's a prominent character. He's not a villain. He is not driving the plot in terms of the negative experience for our characters. Yes, he struck Peri. Striking anyone is wrong, but he is a guard and a soldier, and she was a rebel or an intruder at the very least. And it's like, yeah, it's horrible what he did, but it's no different than any other guard. It's literally no different than any other guard.
Well, it's like, okay, it wasn't, but the slap isn't from the fact that she's a rebel or she should. It's like, you made me look like a fool. I was like, that is fucking.
But it's still the guard mentality, though. Do you know what I mean? He is like, he represents those who are caught in the system. That's his whole thing, right? He's terrified at the beginning. He's clearly quite new in the role. Like, he thinks that they're hallucinations, even though he's got his fucking helmet on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's so awkward and paranoid about it. Because I just think he's a minor character. I don't think he's even really worth further discussion. The fact that you kept him on the list, and I was like, okay, why?
It's because it just to your point. Yes, he is like, I don't. He gets into the villain, the character discussion component by just, again, I suppose, the skin of his teeth in terms of the point that I raised. But I think what it is that, and we'll come to the overall section, is that for the time that you and I are currently in, I think this is a very poignant story. There's an awful lot of social commentary in this story that is very relevant to now. And people like Maldak, in positions that they're in, are very representative of people in current positions of power in the world now. So maybe that is coloring my thing for this character. Outside of yes, female companions have been slapped or assaulted before by random whoever's that have the same amount of dialogue or what, and we haven't put them into these discussion points of view. Maybe it's the fact that it's played by O'Teal, who is like, it's his stock and trade to play that type of character. But also I think it's like the very relevancy of the social commentary in this story as is to the world that you and I are living in at the moment.
Yeah, my thing, I don't think he is any more prominent story-wise than the two people watching the program. And I think he doesn't contribute anything else to that. The way I would describe him is, so you've seen She-Hulk, right?
Yes, I have.
There is a scene in She-Hulk where, spoilers, Daredevil explains the difference between a grunt and, I forgot the other word he uses.
I think it's just like a thug, isn't it? A thug and...
No, it's a grunt and basically a believer in the system, right?
Yeah.
A grunt does what they're told.
Yeah.
Maldak is a grunt who grew up in the system and lives his life by the system. He is not an acolyte of the chief and of Quilliam. He is not of their level. He doesn't even fucking understand what he's doing. That isn't an excuse. It's just a comment. It's not an excuse. I think his turn at the end, yeah, it's, the governor being like, you could be sat in my chair and look what's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he's doing it because he realizes that could be me doesn't mean that that's a bad reason to do it. He frees him. He doesn't just freeze him and stay behind. He freezes him. He frees him and then shows them the way to find the guy. And like, he's full on with him at that point. He made his decision, which is like, either stay a grunt or I can side with this guy. Look at what he's doing. Look at like the emotion he's putting into it. Look at like, he's dying and he's still trying to save our people. I want to be him because of him, not I want to be like these two fuckers who are fucking psychotic. Do you know? And I think that choice is why, given the fact that we are discussing him, what I would put him as a prominent character. He's not a villain. He's not driving plot. He's just fucking there.
Hmm.
And yeah, he hit Peri in the face. And that's bad. And yes, in the modern commentary that this story speaks to, the fact that you are a cog in a system does not protect you from being... You're still guilty of being, you know, you did the horrible thing. I was just following orders isn't a fucking excuse. But when you choose to veer from those orders, that is a decision that you make. And all 11 other guys didn't make that decision. Maldak did. Do you know? So, yeah. But then we have our true villains of the piece.
Also, it was henchman and goon. That's the very difference.
A henchman believes in the cause. A goon does not.
Yes.
Maldak is a goon.
Yes.
Quilliam and the Chief, though.
In terms of the ranking, I don't know if whether Syl or the Chief is the chief villain, is the main villain in this story. But definitely Quilliam is tertiary. But the other two, we'll come to it when we come to it. But Quilliam, the dude is just fucking sick. Like, he is the most... it's twisted mad scientist to a whole new fucking level because of the glee that he takes in the idea of torture. And again, specifically towards women, seemingly. And it's like one of the things about the metamorphic side of things, as he points out, is that it's based on the inner workings of the person's mind. So if a person sees themselves in a certain light or in a certain way, that's what they'll morph into. And he puts the whole idea of being worthless into Arata's head earlier on. So that's why she starts to turn into a reptile, because he says that, like, well, they're ground dwellers, they're below and all that kind of stuff. Peri's one I think is kind of interesting because she turns into a bird and he says, oh, maybe she wanted to try and fly away. And it's like, wait, well, she wants to get to the TARDIS. She wants to, like, free roam the galaxy, whatever. But it's his whole thing of like, well, why should I stop it when I could just sit here and watch and see where it goes? You know, this is exciting for me. Then it was like, I was half expecting him to just fucking whip it out and start having a go, you know? But then there's the fact that, like, the doctor points out, like, that you stopped. The reason that you're wearing a mask is because you went too far with the experimentation and it backfired on you. So now you just like your guinea pigs, because his face is all fucking crisscross fucked up. Then there's his like, the doctor kind of points out, like, his whole thing of, like, he can never be brought up for election because his role is a permanent one. He fills that role. So again, he's not subject to the dictates of the governorship. So he can essentially kind of do what he wants. And then at the end, like, it's because of his sadism that he dies. Because the chief, the more logical of the pair, basically says, let's just fucking shoot them. And he's like, no, I want to see them suffer. I want to do it myself. I want to get, you know, physical with this whole kind of thing. And it's that kind of fucking sadism and just stepping on his own fucking dick that gets him killed. But definitely one of the most twisted characters we've seen in a while, I think.
Yeah, I like, because obviously you sent me over the character list before I watched it, and I was watching it being like, why the fuck does he want to discuss this guy? Because he isn't in a whole lot of it.
No.
But he does leave a lasting impression. he is the physical representation of the worst of Varos's cruelty, because the chief relishes in it in a way, and we'll talk about that in a second. The audience watching relishes it in their own way, but Quilliam gets a sadistic, like you said, somewhat sexual pleasure out of it, and it's just all kinds of wrong. I think the whole Phantom of the Opera mask wasn't really needed, to be honest. He doesn't strike me as the type of guy who would hide the scar.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that was unnecessary.
He's not like Sharon's chick. Women don't want to fuck me anymore.
Yeah. But he is just a sadistic creep. Like, he's primarily like the stock mad scientist. But like taken to the ultimate extreme. The fact that like even though he is outside of the interaction with Peri and Areta, he is not a driver of plot. He has nothing to do with the Syl storyline. He has nothing to do with capturing them. None of that. He's just like, oh hey, you have people, can I touch them, please?
Yeah.
That's literally all he wants. Literally it. He couldn't give a shit about anything else. But I think it's interesting that his role is completely outside of the system. And it goes back to the, again, slightly underdeveloped background of these people, which is that this was a prison planet. And clearly, Quilliam, his role, maybe it was like a descendant role of like the camp doctor, or I don't know, maybe they were doing a bit of a Mengele type thing on these people, you know, over the course of generations.
Very Mengele about him. Something very Mengele about him.
But like, that's his job. And he's like, you can't get rid of me, you can't order me, I'm not subject to any vote, I'm no nothing, this is my job and this is who I am. And people like him and what he does, that makes me sad for the governor. I think it's going to take him a long time to change people's minds.
Yes.
I think Quilliam was always in that upper echelon, so he was always that sort of like descendant of, you know, guard or descendant of management or whatever. But he really cements how possibly a lot of people on this planet see human suffering, which is that it's enjoyment and it's pleasure.
Yeah.
I love the fact that like his death is all his own fault. Like the chief and everyone else is like, dude, what are you? No, like we can shoot them from here. Like, why are you doing a big thing? And he's like, no, I must have my weird sexual gratification. Oh no, something hit me in the neck. I'm dead. But yeah, I think he's probably, I mean, this is a story of a lot of mosts, but I think he's probably the most sadistic character. Actually, no, because we did have your man in Caves of Androzani. He and Vecca get along very well together.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like they just compare masks, compare their looks, the whole
They're all
I think Shara's Jack was like probably the most like buzzword like incel-ish of the whole of everything we've seen. But no, I think Quilliam is just, he is sadistic. He's just a fucking monster like Mengele. That's all.
Yeah. But yeah, and then so my suggestion is that we do the chief next, because I think Syl is generally considered, rightly or wrongly, the villain of the piece, and that's a very high amount of othering that we do as standard as humans. And it's probably the reason why the BBC head was quite angry that they gave the disabled person the role of the villain. But let's do the chief first, because the chief and Quilliam kind of go together, and then you've got Syl being silly.
So, that was bad.
But it still made you laugh.
I know. The chief is a real slippery customer. He really is. And I would say potentially the chief villain of the piece. Because he's rigged the system in his favor completely. Because I think he is one of the elite that is up for the role of governor, but he's the one that picks the ballot. So he can choose whoever whoever the fuck it is, or he can throw like how many.
His name doesn't go into the hat.
Oh, his name doesn't go into that.
It's only the 12 guards. It's only the 12 guards. Like, so Quilliam and him are not in the running.
Yeah. Okay, but so that being like, it's like still though, like he got into the role of chief because the governor is a fucking puppet at the end of the day, because if the governor doesn't do exactly what the status quo demands, the chief can fucking, because the chief said like that there's a contingency in the plans where it's like, if you fail to do an action based on the outcome of a previous vote, I can call a snap vote. And as we've seen, like the cellular disintegrator, the more frequently it's used on someone, the quicker they die. So it's like he's no different than fucking those, like you'd hear about, like the imperial freedmen in the early days of the Roman Empire, where the emperor was just essentially signing documents that these guys were fucking creating. Like the empire was run by bureaucrats. So here it's a case of he's very much like that. And one thing though that I like about the presentation of the chief is that he's not overtly sinister. He has a mustache, but he doesn't twirl it. Like he's hiding in plain sight. It's great to watch. Like, because I'm just going, he's the bad guy. He's the fucking one that's doing all this shit to people. He's right there, but no, they can't see it because he's just hiding in plain sight under the guise of, well, these are the rules, these are the laws, and you've no idea how much I like that in a character where it's just like, oh god, you're such a fucking prick. Because okay, there's a time and place where I do look quite like a mustache twirling villain, like the Sunmakers. Like I thought that guy was fucking hilarious, and I loved him for it. But here, though, because there's a bit more darkness to the social commentary as opposed to the Sunmakers, it's like it's more pervasive that he just seems like an ordinary guy that is enjoying the power that comes in his role. But yes, he is. I think he's a really enjoyable villain to watch, because I'm watching him and I'm like, every time he makes a decision or he says something, you know it's going to be rad ramifications, and you're like, I want to see how the Doctor or whoever will be able to counteract his plans. So I really enjoyed watching the Chief.
Yeah, so for me, the Chief is a interesting character because I think because his title is Chief Officer, right? Which is just like to just take two titles and just smush them together into one. So his title is Chief Officer, and he is very much what the quote unquote rebels found out about. I'm guessing he inherited that job from his dad. And his dad inherited from his dad, and his dad inherited from his dad, and his dad was the head of the guard back when this was a prison planet, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he's the one that's rigged it in his favor or if generations have rigged it in his favor, but yeah. Because the fact is, he controls everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who picks the name out of the hat. He's the one who, in their bylaws, has this ultimate control to, like you said, to call a vote. He also puts pressure to get what he wants. So, 6 credits per unit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Syl is clearly paying 7 credits per unit and the Chief is taking one off the top. Mm-hmm. He has his own way of doing it. But he's very much a representative of this like unchecked power.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's the type of guy where, like, if the governor turns around and they're like, do you know what, you're fired, He's like, oh, you actually can't fire me because this law says you can't. So,
Yeah.
Suck it. I think he reminds me a lot. And this is interesting given what we talked about last time. He reminds me a lot of the chief guard in Alien 3.
Yeah.
He's a very similar vibe.
It's the bald head, isn't it?
A little bit. But you sort of imagine him being like, this is what we know, this is the order of the day, or whatever, because like he gives no quarter at all. Do you know? Like the governor is kind of wearing Syl down a small bit, like Syl's on the back foot. And the chief is like, well, you told the people you would speak in 5 minutes. You're going to speak in 5 minutes. I don't give a shit what you do. So like in many ways he's incredibly one-dimensional. Like he just is what he is. But I think he plays it really well. Again, a great performance. I think in terms of the story, he's a good representation of that unchecked power. And again, if we're talking about like the analogies that are being made in this story and the whole idea behind it is like you have showrunners on a show, but ultimately it's the guy in the head office that makes the decisions.
Yeah.
So if you imagine you have a showrunner for a show, but the BBC chief controller who decides who gets that position and who makes the final choices and who makes the final edits. And that's essentially what he is.
Yeah.
Do you know? So yeah, I think he's an interesting one-dimensional character. So he's an interesting character because he's one-dimensional and the situation that he's in is interesting. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then last but by no means least, Silly Syl.
Syl of no chill. Just stop with the tongue. Just fucking stop with the tongue. It's just like so. In an effort to not be given out to when I don't tell her things, I sent Tricia a random message the other day in work. I said, how do you feel about that scene in Return of the Jedi where Jabba licks his lips at Princess Leia? And she was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But also, ew. So it's like, right, cool. There's something much worse that's happening in Vengence and Varos. I'm not going to do the sound here because there are certain things I have promised Trish in terms of sound making I will never do, and I think this will fall into that category. But yeah, it's essentially a weird ululating sound that he makes, and it's fucking gross. But the guy absolutely has no chill whatsoever. He is always in fifth gear. He's all character, he's no stick. Pick your analogy. Because the core essence of him as a villain isn't new to the show. We've seen batshit crazy fucking corporate execs or wannabe dictators, whatever. And if, like, I suppose the Shallcross's point of view is that I think the reason that Syl is so villainous and so iconic in that villainy is because of his design. Like, he is a small aquatic grub-like creature that's like it's essentially a human face on like a sea slug's body, which is just ugh. And like it's uttering. The reason that he's so villainous is because he is utter. If he was a human, if he was like or whatever, like he wouldn't be anything special, and the chief would be the chief villain of this thing. But I think to your point is that he's utter, and his mannerisms and his movements and everything are just so fucking distressing. Also, his cries of "moisturize me," it's very kind of proto Lady Cassandra from New Who, but very vain, very vain. You know, like I'm going to be Viceroy. I love the way he says governor as well, governor. But like, he's a shrewd businessman, all right, because he's got the Varosians convinced that fucking Zeton 7, one of the most valuable mineral ores in the galaxy, is worth jack shit. Like, because that's the thing, is that, like, yes, it's super rare, but the Varosians don't know that it's super rare. They just think it's their chief commodity, but it's not worth anything on the market. So he's like, I should get this for fucking pennies. And it's the fact that because he thinks they're so fucking tick stupid, he gets so annoyed at the fact that he can't haggle it down any further. And like that, like it's just like the man is just one. Like, he's a harsh attack waiting to happen. Very interesting though that he doesn't get any great comeuppance, other than the fact of I have to part with more money than I wanted to, because the dictated at the end is, oh shit, another vein of the mineral has been found. Our competitors are going to get it. We need as much of it as we possibly can at the moment. Get it for anything. All that's coming to my head now is Trading Places for some reason. But yeah, so like, to your point there about one-dimensional villains, I think he is kind of one-dimensional a bit. But it's his design and his mannerisms that make him just so memorable, you know?
Yeah, I think, possibly from Sill's point of view, the orange crop numbers are probably not the highest on his list of priorities.
Your brother, fuck him.
Yes, I have seen Trading Places recently.
Yeah. Wilson, for Christ's sake, Sal. Oh.
Oh.
God.
And that poor fucker in the gorilla suit. Anyway, but yeah, so Sill. Sill was probably my least favorite character to watch, like, ever. Doctor. Now, he doesn't go quite as bad as I had anticipated him going, based off of your Jabba the Hutt comment. Because it's not like he licks Peri's face or anything.
Yeah.
You know? But I think, he's just grotesque, is the thing. And it's his design. Like, because he sits on this, like, pedestal thing, and he's kind of a half aquatic creature. But his lower half, as I said, is very phallic. And it undulates and, like, quivers and shakes when he gets excited. And it's just wrong. It's just 50 million different levels of wrong. So every time he was on screen, I was just ever so softly looking to the side. So I didn't have to look at him. And that laugh, oh, sweet suffering Jesus. Yeah, in terms of, like, the other things I don't like you saying, because it gives me the ick. Yeah. Particularly to do with a particular character in a particular audio series.
Yeah.
This probably supersedes that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's just the ultimate ick. Because the thing about Sill is that Sill is designed, I think the reason why he's most iconic, like, he is one of the most iconic villains of Conzir. Even I knew what he looked like before I ever saw the story. And I've never seen any of Colin's stuff before now. It's the grotesque nature of him and the sadistic glee he gets out of everything. Because he's a shit businessman in many ways, in the sense of, because he can't talk him down anymore. And all he's saying is, like, do me a better deal. He doesn't actually barter very well. It doesn't actually, like, he doesn't negotiate very well at all. But he tries to take control of everything. in this situation. He was so excited to see them hang, and he's so excited to see people tortured, and like when he realizes you sell this, dude, I can help you. I can help you sell this to like whatever. I'm like, dude, eyes on the prize now. Like, you've gone off now. It's like this, dude, like bring it back. I think in terms of comeuppance, though, my read of it was he's going to be in deep fucking shit once his bosses realize that he nearly cost them the entire fucking contract. Like, because the governor's going to go back and say, yeah, it's 20 credits. Also, that fucker's never allowed near my planet ever again.
Yeah.
Like, no. So yeah, I do think like his panic is crazy because like the invasion isn't happening. He's losing out on the big deal he wants. And the unwritten line in my mind was like, he's going to get fucking deep shit. This is over. But yeah, he is the ultimate ick. And I'm not particularly looking forward to seeing him again.
Yep.
I will say though, all credit to fucking Nabil, because as a performance, it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was just amazing at being horrible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't quite get this sort of phallic nature of everything. It's just, no. No.
Yeah.
Me no likey.
Oh.
Okay. We have come to the end.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the Doctor, we've talked about Peri, we've talked about our story-based characters, even the ones that we disagreed on whether we should talk about them or not, which led to us talking about them even more than we probably would have had we agreed to talk about them in the first place.
Yes.
Now we're on to the overall thoughts. So, for those who are new, at the end of each story, we give our thoughts on the story as a whole, and we give it a score out of 5. And Paddy's going first.
Yes. This was dark. Really dark. And it is, again, as I said earlier on, I think it's because it's very relevant to what's going on today in the world. Like, we talked about how relevant Caves of Androzani is to the current landscape of things. I think Vengeance and Varos is just as relevant. Because we talked about like the married couple that are essentially like a Greek chorus for this thing. And it's through them we find out that like voting is mandatory, and if you're caught with any sort of voting fraud, it's death. It's a death sentence, because they throw you into like the punishment zone or the metamorphic chamber or whatever it is. It's like they have secret police that come and check your balloting, because like, all the ballot boxes are in your own home. Excuse me. And it's like they've got the secret police that will come and they'll question you to see whether or not you cast a vote for another person. Like, because he said, like, I'm going to go sleep. She goes, no, you're not. You're going to vote. And if you don't, I'm going to tell them when they come asking. And then there's a scene where, because he's very anti-governor, he presses the no vote for himself and then for hers as well, like just completely pushing her aside. He's like, I think it's very interesting that they're together in the they're together in the first place, you know, because it's like they'll sell each other out in a heartbeat. So but like, it's through them that we get the bigger view into that no matter what time the world is in, it's like the ramifications of politics and left, right, center ideologies. It's like, unless there are checks and balances in place, it leads to this type of fucking stuff, and it's just kind of scary in that capacity. Of the characters, I would have liked to have seen a bit more of John Dar and Arata, because I think they were a bit underused, and I think like God love Jason Connery. Like he's not this. Don't think he's the same level of caliber of his dad, because he was given some dialogue that came across as very clunky. It's like, oh, you're very verbose for a common laborer. Like um, it just didn't seem to kind of fit with the presentation of the character and where the character went after he spoke those lines. And I also, like, I think there was some kind of prop type things that were a bit like the little guard cars. They would have been able to walk faster. Like, it's like a really weird little small little electric dune buggy. It's like, no, they could have walked faster. Getting Colin with his big ass lanky frame into that thing was funny. So that was a bit meh. But I think for the guest performances for the most part were great. Like, I thought Martin Jarvis and Nabil were fantastic in their roles. For like, specifically, I would say Martin, because again, just the portrayal of such a complex character as the governor was great. And obviously then the chief and Quilliam and Maldak were like, I think Owen is a fantastic actor, and it's like, as I said, he plays assholes so well. Um, but Colin is doing a fantastic job as the Doctor, and Peri also, or Nicola as Peri, is doing a great job. And it's just that the Doctor and Peri are really enjoyable to watch. They are. Like, I'm having such a great time watching it. And one thing, you and I have always loved with Doctor Who is social commentary. It's like, we kind of like it in Star Trek as well. Like, I think it's like, it's nice that science fiction, can showcase elements of today within the future. So I was kind of back and forth with my scoring on this story, but I think our discussion of it has kind of tipped it a small bit. So I'll put it as a 4.
Very good. Do-do-do.
Like, I was at a 3.5 initially. Then, like, as we were going on, I was a bit 3.75. And like, there's a lot of stuff in here that's like, it's just really engaging viewing. It's really engaging to talk about. So yeah, no, I bumped it up to a 4.
Okay. Not bad. This is your second 4 in a row.
Yeah.
Which is great. So
I swear to God, it is not a biased thing. It really isn't. It is just, the stories are really good.
Okay. My thoughts on the story. So if we're to go back to, one of our how to put it, inspiring podcasts for the show, which is our friends over at Mission Log. At the end of each episode, they asked us, did the story hold up?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a story that does hold up. And it's kind of sad that it does.
Yeah.
Because the message behind it is still relevant. And there's 2 messages behind this. One is what you talked about, which is the sort of more political aspect of it. But the other is what the story was originally written for, which is how we take pleasure from violence on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Because bearing in mind, this story was before I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, before Survivor, before Big Brother, the TV show. But there is clearly very much an Orwellian spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cameras are everywhere.
Yeah.
The cameras are always watching. And it's again, it's bread and circuses, right? So it's the commoner being fed on terrible things happening to other people. And it's one of the things, and Colin mentioned it in the behind the sofa for the story, is that it seemed to really frustrate him that everyone ranks on this story being like, oh, it's so violent or whatever. He said that was the fucking point.
Mm-hmm.
The point of the story is that the violence we have on TV is excessive. But when you take it away, people don't know what to fucking do with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or our interest into reality TV. In the case of nowadays, if you think about reality TV, you think about YouTube, TikTok, social media in general, how much we invest ourselves in other people's lives, that when you take it away, we don't know what to do with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
even when we know it's wrong, when you take it away, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Which is the part of the human experience. It's a sad part of the human experience that we take pleasure in other people's pain, even when we try to convince ourselves that we don't.
Yeah.
Do you know? You may hate the idea of forcing someone to eat cockroaches or bull testicles or whatever, but you'll still watch I'm a Celebrity, you'll still vote for who you want to do the challenge, or you'll still vote for who you want to win, and you'll still do whatever. That hasn't changed in the 40 years since this story came out. It's been 40 years, that hasn't changed. And I think, well, yes, the story is dark. It was dark because it had to be.
Yeah.
It wasn't dark for the sake of it. It was dark to get the moral, the meaning, the message, as the guys with Mr. North call it. It was dark to get that across. And what I think people miss, and like Sylvester pointed this out in the behind the sofa, and he's so right, and I feel so bad for Colin. Because the one bit of light in the story is Colin. Colin brings the few bits of humour that we get. He brings the light to this story, and yet people paint him with the same brush they paint the story. It's like, no, the Doctor is the one bringing them out of the violence, bringing them out of the darkness. Colin is the one injecting that little bit of humour in, like, in episode 1 with him and Peri. I was like, did you miss the whole point? Now, is it the best episode ever? No. There's too many characters. Half of them are underdeveloped. The whole thing with, like, Syl's people and an invasion and not an invasion, another sort of, it's clunky as hell. The actual, like, it's like a really good building with, like, the shoddiest foundations ever. Do you know? Yeah. And, like, pillars that are just like, oh, I'm gonna kill them. But I think it's a really good story. It's a really good premise. Could the special effects have been better? Yeah. Could the props have been better? Yeah. Does half the budget go to giving Nicola a new coloured matching combo every week? Yeah, I'm sure it does. But it was good. Is still the worst thing to watch? Yeah, the performances were amazing. So for me, I was kind of torn between a 3 and a 4. It's kind of humming and hawing between the two. Personally, I'm going to draw it down the middle at a 3.5 because for me, as much as I think it's a very relevant story, as much as I think you could watch it now and still get the same thing out of it that you would have gotten 40 years ago, which, as I said, is quite sad when you think about it. The whole thing with Syl, I'm like, no, sorry, like,
yeah,
I just didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy that character. I think he was unnecessary. He didn't add the grotesque nature of him and, like, the whole tongue thing and all that. It didn't add anything to the story, and it just made me want to fast forward through his bits.
Yeah.
So for that, for me, I can't give it a 4, but I am going to give it a 3.5.
Cool. Yeah, as I said, like, if Syl had just been like another human representative, greedy human representative of a mighty corporation, he wouldn't be as memorable.
No, and, like, it's great that he's memorable, but I think the character within the story would have been just as effective if it had been toned down like 50%.
Yeah.
Like, you could even keep his design the same, but just
because
tone it down like
kind
50%.
To like the point that I kind of like, I think that the chief is the main villain.
Yeah.
Still though, like, as I think people have probably gathered, is that this was a really good and interesting discussion and another successful outing from Colin. And it's really interesting to see it because of you coming in blind to the actual content, but knowing the discourse surrounding the character. So, like, each week from that aspect of it is a really good, fun thing to have to discuss. And we're going to have that again next time when we talk about another very important landmark story, which is the Mark of the Rani.
A character I have heard of, but never seen. Until next time, though.
Bye. Bye.